Hello, welcome to Art 169. I am your professor, and this video may be used for other forms of this class, but in this very first video, now this is not a software class, but more of a 2D design creative process, building those foundations class, but in a digital space. So typically in a 2D design class, you would use pen and pencil and paper, markers, paint, what have you. We are using Photoshop and Illustrator. While this is not a software class, most students should have been taken Art 100 prior to taking this class or other digital classes. You may be concurrently taking Art 100 or not have as much experience. So we're going to do a few videos just on the very basics of Photoshop and Illustrator. There will be other demos throughout the semester of more complicated things that we go over. So I am using a Mac, and I will be using a Mac this whole semester. If you're a PC person, anytime I say command, you would just sub that out for control. So if I say command T, it really means control T for you PC folks. I am on Adobe Photoshop CC 2018, the newest and most updated version. If you haven't updated, I encourage you to update it. Update all of your apps that you're using. As you see, I have Photoshop Bridge, which I haven't updated, Lightroom, which is this whole other animal with the Creative Cloud and Classic, and if you're not a photography person, we won't get into it. We have Illustrator. I use After Effects, which I haven't updated, and Adobe Premiere Pro, which I have updated as well. If you're using an older version, you'll be fine. I encourage you to update to make sure everything works. So if you come up with issues, the first thing I'm always going to ask is, what version are you using? And I'm hoping you're using the most recent version of Photoshop. If you're still using CS6, I believe it's fine. A lot of the functions are the same. You will miss a few. They did some major changes with the selections and stuff, which we'll get into in a few weeks. But do update if you can. If you don't have access, the Phoenix College Library has the full Creative Cloud. We also have labs that are open on campus. If you're interested, we have them. And if you're really stuck and you want to come into my in-person class, it is Tuesday, Thursdays from noon to 2:45. Send me an email. We could talk to see if there's seats available. So I have already opened Adobe Photoshop right now, and I have two tabs open here and here. But we're just going to kind of talk about this layout and see what we have. If you're not super familiar, this could be very scary. So I've already opened up some documents. If you haven't, open up any document, any size really, just to play around with, or just take some notes as we go on. So when you open up Photoshop, you have a couple different elements. The big thing is your project window, and this is what you're working on. Now you may not have these rulers. I love having these rulers. I'm able to guide things, and so you can see when I move my mouse, the cursor kind of gives me a guide and measurement. If you want to put your rulers on, it's Command R or Control R for those PC folks. And I have just a blank window here. You have your control panel here, so anytime you click on a new tool, you see right up here will change, and that will change relative to whatever tool you have. It gives you more functions, which could be helpful knowing how to edit them, and we'll talk about the different edits that it does. So if I say in your control panel, I mean right here. This is your toolbar. Yours may be like mine. Yours may have two columns, and you may have less tools. If you kind of click down here, it'll kind of open up more tools, but almost all of my tools are open. You see it wants to give me tips because they literally just updated to 2018 before creating this video, so it's going to think that I need them. So you'll see them pop up. If yours is popping up too, it's no big deal. I think there's some function we can turn them off. So up here you have your menu bar, and this is sort of your traditional menu functions. You have up here your Creative Cloud, Photoshop preferences, services, hide, CC, quit, Command Q, which we'll use that quite a bit. Your files, how you open up new files, create new files, save, export. Typically you'll use exporting for when you're doing animation and GIFs, which we will not be doing that in Adobe Photoshop in this class, but definitely fun to check out. There's scripts through batching, context sheets and stuff. We won't get into in this class, but it's good to know that they're there. There's scripts, there's importing, printing. If you're in the in-person class, you do print for the semester. There's edit with a bunch of different functions. There's cut and copy, check spelling when we use type. But I always check my spelling in a Word document, either Microsoft Word or in the text editor in Google Drive. Perspective warp, we get a lot of these warp stuff towards the end. They're very fun to play around with. I encourage it. Edit brush, toolbar, image. We'll get into this probably in the next few videos for image adjustments, image size, canvas size, rotation, layer. We'll talk about our layers in a moment. Type, when we get in, we do text within our next set. Select, filter, which are very fun to play with. We play with them a little bit, but you're encouraged to really explore 3D. We do not get into that view. Window, workspace, and help. So when you have your document here, you also, if you kind of go to the right, you have some other functions. If yours does not look like this, we can change your workspace. And you can eventually sort of dictate how you like your workspace as you get further on. So if you go to Window, you can go to Workspace, there's Essentials, which there is 3D for 3D editing. So this is stuff that they've kind of determined what people like. Eventually you can change things in and out. You can drag things in and out. If you go to Window, you have all your other things. So if I want to bring up a timeline, if I was doing animation, it would pop down here. If I want it gone, I can do this, and so that check mark is off. You have your layers. Now, Photoshop works on layers, and we'll talk a little bit about it in a second, but imagine everything you're drawing, if you add a new layer, is on a different piece of cellophane. So remember those old cell animations you would see, and it has the background, and it has a cellophane or clear sheet with a part of a picture on, and it can change for the animation. It's kind of like that, but you can have as many sheets on, and we will kind of get into that in a second. So in your Tools panel, we have a Selection Marquee tool where you can draw selections, but if you don't have anything to select, it may not be as fun. You have your Elliptical Marquee tool, and if you hold down Shift while you're dragging, it will make a perfect circle. If you hold down Alt or Option and pull out, it pulls out from the center point of where you're going. If I want to get rid of this selection, I'll do a Command D for deselect. We have a lasso tool, which is sort of frame selections. Command D for deselect. Polygonal, where you kind of add little points. It's kind of makes me think of when you cut something out in scissors and you do a big cut and they do narrow cut in. And some people like sort of the polygonal, sort of this edgy, jagged look. Command D. Magnetic lasso tool, now it doesn't really work too well on a blank background, but what it does is it will snap to do changes in the pixels that you're working on. And I'll just kind of close it back up and do a Command D. There's quick selection, magnetic wand. I'm actually going to pop onto this paintbrush so we can kind of get active to make something. Now the first thing you see, my colors aren't different. If I do D on my keyboard, just D, it defaults to black and white. And if I do X, it'll switch them around. And I can kind of draw with my mouse. In my control panel, I can pop open and I have a selection of brushes that I can choose from. We'll get more in depth in brushes, but it might be fun to play around with them. So we're going to talk a little bit about pixels and photographs, because Photoshop is a raster-based program, and if you don't know what raster means, it's kind of like it's made of pixels. Tiny bits of elements work together to create an image. So in my second tab here, I have a photograph of 2 chairs. As you see, of 1 chair, 2 chairs, this is a photograph. This isn't drawn in Photoshop. It's taken from a camera and then brought into. Typically, Photoshop's great for working with photographs and images because they are already pixel-based. Now, when we talk about Illustrator, you'll understand the difference between pixel and raster. Your Art 100 class should go more in depth than this, but there will be a PDF on Canvas for those of you that are curious. Now, when I talk about pixels, you may be familiar seeing sort of this like grainy, grody looking image on the internet that may have been saved 2 times or is low quality. So what I'm going to do is going to do a Command plus on my keyboard, and I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to keep zooming in. So this is at 100% viewing. It's very crisp and sharp. But we want to see those pixels so we know what we're talking about. As you can see, as I'm getting closer, you can see these lines and all these dots and these pixels. Each pixel is one little bit of information, and it's sat next to each other and kind of like this X and Y axis, and they're all full of color, tones, values, hues, etc. And they're all different from each other, and up close it doesn't make much sense, but if you zoom out, 100%, it makes an image. If you've been into an art museum or have heard of Monet from your art history class, it's kind of the same process. Now, if we go to the image that we drew and zoom in, even though this isn't a photograph, it is made of pixels, and we can see the difference. So that's going to be it for this first video. The next video will kind of talk about layers and adding images and opening files within Adobe Photoshop. I'll let you kind of play around a little bit, make some notes, and we'll see you in your next video. Bye.